Hello everyone, ImmortanG here and welcome to another iRacing video. In today's video, I'm kicking off a new video series in which I do a weekly analysis and produce a car tier list for the current popular multi-car series in iRacing. We're going to be focusing primarily on the IMSA Michelin Pilot series with its TC and GT4 cars, and also the GT3 series, which includes a GT3 Challenge Fix to the VRS Sprint and IMSA Hagerty series. A quick disclaimer, of course, take this analysis with a grain of salt. I'm not a driving expert by any means. Who knows the difference of each car and track and how to put down amazing laps and such. Nor do I have access to the raw data. I'm just a nerd attempting to analyze the stats I do have access to and take a look behind the balance of performance and how the iRacing community actually performs in these series. Honestly, I myself have gotten a bit too caught up in the min-maxing that goes on with these series in particular, and I was interested to kind of take a look behind the door and see what's actually going on with the data behind all the talk and have a little fun with it too. To make this analysis and generate the plots, you'll see I'm using the wonderful iRacing Reports Discord run by Rob Crouch. Link down below. Please go check it out. And one last thing before we get into it, I'm going to start off by taking a quick look at week one's results. But in future videos, if people find this video interesting or even useful, which I hope you do, we will jump right into the current weekly series. Okay, so first up, we're taking a look at the IMSA Hagerty at Coda and the GT3 Sprint Challenge, which were both at Knock Hill, the new map introduced by iRacing this season. The main statistic I'll be using to make my judgments are the median values produced by these box plots you see below. Just a quick refresher on these box plots. The box covers all the values that make up the 25th to 75th percentile of the data, with the median represented by the white line running at the 50th percentile. The darker colored dot is the mean value. The whiskers branch out to the min and max values, and any of those dots you see outside the whiskers represent outliers. And if the median value is more left or right and not in the middle, that is telling us the data is skewed in one direction or the other, more spread out, more variable. In other words, the shorter side of the box tells us the results are much closer together, but keep in mind both sides still have an equal amount of data points. Now I'm using the median over the traditional mean here, as in my studies at university in science have shown that when dealing with more skewed variable data, median is a better representation, as it often softens the effects of the outliers, giving us what I believe to be a better read of the data here. Okay, so after all that, are you still with me here? I hope you are. Now we're going to dive into it. Okay, so first let's take a look at the GT3 Challenge here, the fixed series. We see the overall medians for the average race laps are lining up pretty close to each other, and the BOP is looking pretty good. Two surprises to me are how well the McLaren did and how poorly the Ford performed. Also included right above these box plots, we can see the fastest average laps attained by a single driver over the course of the week for each car. But I hope you can kind of see how this data might be unreliable. Like, for example, look at the Mercedes here. The best driver was only a 2500K I rating, where the BMW driver was a whopping 8500K I rating. So no kidding, the Mercedes was off pace. You don't have the best drivers driving it. So with that said, I kind of find that using that data is maybe a little misleading, and I see it show up in a few different places, and so I don't know for sure if this is what's driving the min-maxing of the community when it comes to choosing the fastest cars everyone is racing. But I find maybe it's not a very good metric, and for the very least, it's a horrible metric, I think, for people to use that are not in the top splits. So I think we should be looking at these median values. I think it's more representation of how the iRacing community is driving these cars, and as we can see, they're really not that far off each other. And well, we'll just dive into it a little bit more here. Let's move over to the sprint race, which is a 40-minute race. And in the longer and open setup sprint races, we see some minor variation from the fixed results, but overall still the median times remain well under 1 second of each other. Of note are again how well the McLaren did, but even more so is how the Ford performed. I think maybe this is pointing to a fixed setup issue that might need adjusting on the Ford, at least at Knock Hill. In the third graphic over here, we have the Hagerty series, which is at Circuit of Americas. We have the Audi still leading the way with some movement in the rest of the pack. And we're going to move over to the next slide to dig a little bit more into that. Here I put up the general rankings by the median results. So in the Hagerty series, we have the Audi, Lambo, Porsche, BMW, Mercedes, McLaren kind of came very close to each other. So we just put them as a tie at 5th. And surprisingly, the Ferrari in 6th. Next over in the VRS Sprint series, you see the Audi and surprisingly the McLaren showing up here towards the top. And then we had the BMW, Lamborghini, Ferrari, Ford, Porsche, and Mercedes coming in 7th. Then for the GT3 challenge, the fixed setup show almost all the cars are within approximately half a second of each other. The Ford, however, seemed to have that poor fixed setup that we were talking about, as we're seeing it perform much better over at the Sprint Series. So with this iRacing statistics bot, you can actually look further down into each individual division. So I thought it'd be interesting maybe to look at some of the lower divisions here. So we have Division 7, 6, and 5. In particular, we're looking at the sprint races here from Knock Hill. If you don't know already how divisions kind of work in iRacing, basically in a quick summarized version of this, iRacing at the beginning of each season separates entire player base into divisions based on iRating, with the 10th division being the lowest I-rated people and Division 1 being the best I-rating individuals. Interestingly, the changes between which cars run faster, median times per division can be quite stark. For example, the Mercedes is one of the best in Division 7, but seems to perform worse progressively as we mind the divisions. The question is that a function of the cars being faster and the Mercs slower? Or is it just the faster drivers leaving behind the Mercedes because it wasn't deemed the fastest car by a handful of aliens? I don't have the data to look further into this question. For example, to see how many upper I rating folk did actually try it, or maybe there are a lot of people not using it because it doesn't match their driving style. Who knows? Either way, we will have to leave that up to speculation at the moment. Okay, next we're going to take a look at the Michelin Pilot Challenge results from last week. Overall, the GT4, the median times are within 1 second of each other and are not that too far off. Although the Porsche seems to have a bigger chunk of that 25 to 75% range in the faster time ranges. The TC cars, on the other hand, seem to be spot on and very well balanced, which is awesome to see. And again, we take another look at the lower division just to see if there's any changes. And we can see here for Division 6, not really. The GT4s at the lower split appear to be more competitive. The McLaren showing least variability. And the Porsche still has a distinct higher ceiling, I think. Not much change with the TCR cars. Maybe Hyundai being easier to drive, given how the data is skewing. If we can deem anything from the skewness of this data, even if you look back at the GT3 cars, maybe it's showing us how difficult it can be to be consistent if you're not in that upper 25 to 50 percentile for some cars, or how hard it may be to drive on the edge if it's skewed the other way. Okay, so to recap here, week 1 analysis, I think one should be mindful when looking at fastest average lap times, of the deviation of the IR between the actual drivers achieving these times. Thus, I think it's more useful for us average, below average, maybe even above average drivers, I'm not 100% sure here, to focus on the median times if we are looking to min-max. All right, so let's take a look at week 2 data. And from here on out, this is kind of how I foresee future videos going format-wise. Since we don't have like a full week of data, it doesn't make as much sense to go as in depth as we did for week 1. So let's have ourselves some fun and make some tier lists. Okay, and here with the GT3 challenge is Zandvoort. In the S tier, we have the Audi and Lambo. In the A tier, we have the BMW and Porsche. B tier, Ferrari, McLaren. C tier, Mercedes and Ford. I think it's pretty clear why the Audi and Lamborghini are S tier. As we look at the BMW and the Porsche, BMW in the light blue and the Porsche in the darker blue. I think a slight edge maybe goes to the BMW. However, I think that the top 25th percentiles are, pretty similar. And for the B tier here, the Ferrari and McLaren, Ferrari in green, McLaren in purple. Interestingly, if we actually maybe take a look at the average lap times here, we can see that the R rating for the BMW fastest time and for the McLaren fastest time are not terribly off. So maybe that's a little bit more reliable. However, that means the BMW driver is still technically a better driver if we're going by I rating. Then in C, we have the Mercedes and Ford, and we have the Mercedes in the light green, Ford in the pink, and we can kind of see where they stand. Again, I think the Ford is just not getting a lot of use, so I'm not confident that there's a lot of data to get a really good judgment. Anyways, let's move on to the next slide. So in the 40-minute sprint series with these cars also at Zandvoort, we are moving the Audi alone in S tier, the Porsche into A, with the Lamborghini dropping down into A, and then we have the BMW alone in B. And I kind of changed our rankings here. I felt like the Mercedes and Ford kind of deserved not to be quite down into C, but a C plus, B minus, with the C cars being the Ford and McLaren. Again, you could make an argument of maybe the Porsche deserves to be in the S tier. The top 25th percentile range there matches the Audi. However, the median lap averages are coming almost identical to what people are getting in the Lamborghini, so that's why I put those together in A. If we look at the BMW in the green, dark green, you can kind of see it's like right there in the middle of the pack, so a solid B rating in my opinion. There's probably very little data here for the Ford, so take that C plus with a grain of salt. But as we can see, the Ferrari, when we look at the Ferrari and the Mercedes data, that gap in the 50 to 25 percentile times is a little bit larger, so that's why I wanted to give that Mercedes that C plus over the Ferrari. And then of course the McLaren is kind of close to what we're seeing with the Ferrari, so there you go. All right, folks, let's take a look at the IMSA Hagerty series now, which is at Laguna Seca. And what we see here, I got the Audi and Lambo in the S tier, the BMW and Porsche in A tier, Mercedes, Ferrari B tier, the McLaren in C tier. I do feel maybe we just need more data on McLaren. It could potentially be a B tier car. As you can see, the fastest lap time are still coming from relatively low iRating drivers. It also seems to be very highly variable in that 50 to 75 percentile, the slower drivers. And another note, that after having another night to kind of look over this data and seeing it here, in future tier lists, I may give more weight to that top 50 to 25 percentile if we really want to min max. As you can kind of see here in this example, the Porsche, if we were to do that, maybe could potentially be an S tier, as the top portion of drivers in that 50 to 25 percentile are not too far off the Audi and Lamborghini. And then in the same breath, if you look further down, you can kind of see how the BMW, Ferrari, and Mercedes are kind of almost all identical, even the McLaren, if we were to do that though, however. So I mean, really, there's very minute differences between these cars. And if anything, what I'm finding looking at all this data is that you can just drive what's comfortable to you. To be quite honest, I think that's kind of been the mantra of a lot of people saying, but here are kind of the numbers to back that up. Okay, now let's take a look at the Michelin Pilot Challenge, and we're going to first take a look at the GT4 cars. And this week, of course, it's at Watkins Glen with the boot. And what we're seeing here is we have a pretty dominant S tier Porsche, and for the McLaren and BMW, we threw those into B. So when you compare the McLaren and BMW, they are almost identical, which is good to see, I think, because when we were looking at last week's data, the BMW seemed to be lagging even behind the McLaren, but this week they look to be almost exactly on pace with each other. And of course, we can see how dominant the Porsche is looking when almost the entire 25th to 75th percentile of data fits within the top tiers of the other two cars. So what that means, even the slower Porsche drivers are driving just as fast as the top 50th to 25th percentile of the other two cars. Okay, and last but not least, let's take a look at the TCR cars. We're seeing, again, overall, I think we're very, very close here on BOP, which is good to see. And if we were just to nitpick here a little bit, I would throw the Audi and Hyundai into the A tier and throw the Honda into B, as we can kind of see those median average lap times with the Audi and Hyundai are almost identical, and just slightly slower with the Honda. So even if we look at the percentile ranges here, they're all almost identical too. So that's great to see with this series, and you can't really go wrong with either of the three cars. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it a little bit informative, or at the very least showed a path where you can go and conduct your own analysis. I would love your feedback. If you have any suggestions on how you would interpret the data differently or see an issue with how I did, please let me know in the comments below. And just a quick note for next week's video, it should be a lot shorter, as I won't be going quite in depth into the processes behind my analysis, and we'll just kind of jump right into the tier lists right out the gate. So until next time, folks, I'll see you on track.